Hi, this is Levi Remendelli, and this is the commentary for the Kill Lock Issue 1. Now, this is a series that was a passion project of mine. I worked on for about 3 years around Transformers and my other illustration work, developing the story and seeing it come to life and seeing the characters really take on a life of their own has been just super rewarding, and I really appreciate you checking out and listening to this commentary. So the cover for Issue 1 here, I wanted to get across for a new series that no one has familiarity with. I wanted kind of a universal image. So I thought this idea of a kind of innocent, scared-looking kid robot with a red X on his chest and this sort of really crushing logo above him. I thought that symbolized, like, no matter what, if you don't know anything about the story, it's a little innocent kid in over his head. And that really is kind of a big theme that goes through the series. The credits page here is designed by Tom Long, who was the letterer on the book. He did the logo design, and we worked together on Transformers for IDW. I've known Tom for years, and he was kind of the quiet partner in the beginning stages of this, like coming up with all the cool fonts. Like, I really appreciate all of his work, and I really like the choices here. And then David Marriott at IDW is also credited. He's been the editor of the book ever since it got greenlit by IDW, so thankful to have him on board as well. Page 1 here, I really wanted to kind of ease people into the story. Like, as a personal preference, I don't like when comics start with the first page is just covered in word balloons. I really like easing people into a story and getting them used to the world before you hit them with any sort of exposition or plot. So just the lone figure of the artisan walking across an Arctic landscape, I like the idea of kind of zooming into this character. We see the reveal of this character's face. He's one of the 4 main characters, a really important character. The design of his face, I wanted it to be this thing where he has this one sort of unsympathetic eye that you figure is a circle, but a lot of it's sort of hidden by other plating. And I thought that was a good metaphor for his personality, where you sort of think you know what's under there, but there could be other things. This first 2-page spread kind of establishes the world. I wanted to show these big, like, kind of sci-fi vistas, what you'd expect from a series like this. You can see there's a little shanty town here that's built out of the bones of whatever life forms used to live here. Like, my idea was at one point there was like organic life in this environment or the story, and it's all been wiped out. Now the only thing that's alive is machinery. This next page here, we see the artisan approaching a bar, and the bar, like, word is written in English because I felt, it really, there's no reason for it to not be an alien language, but I felt like the story itself of robots on the run was kind of odd enough or a leap enough that using English, I felt, was enough to kind of help people like frame it in a kind of little bit more like familiar way. So this first scene here is basically an asshole walks into a bar. He just happens to be a robot asshole. That was sort of the concept I had. And this first line of dialogue, what the artisan says, is meant to sort of shatter the sci-fi tropes you just saw, where you saw these big vistas and robots, and now he says a very human, very kind of offensive thing to another character. And I wanted that to sort of throw you off, that it's not what you expect, from a story like this. And this next page tells us a lot about who the artisan is, where he's an engineer. He's a former, high class in his society who's now been branded with this symbol, and he's just sort of disgusted by a lot of the design he sees around him. And he possesses this ability where he can see into other robots and see how they work, and he can disable components on them. I was really inspired by, in Garth Ennis's Preacher comic, I love the idea that, Jesse Custer has this power called the Word, where he can make you do whatever he wants. But over the course of the entire series, he uses that power like very sparingly, only a handful of times, which I thought was amazing. And the artisan is sort of similar, where he has this amazing ability, but he really doesn't use it that often. Like, I wanted it to be like you just sort of get in his head of all the stuff he could do, but he doesn't. It's kind of like very precise moments when he chooses to use it. This next page introduces the laborer, who's another of our 4 main characters. I wanted to really quickly establish that the laborer has a drinking problem, where you see just this close-up of the artisan sort of mocking him, and you see him a little too interested in this class. And I wanted to kind of get across that, just visually, that, yeah, he does have a problem with this. And there's even this element of trolling of the artisan forces this guy to go into a bar to confront him. This big shot of labor kind of picking up the artisan. The design here in the background is based on these bars that I've seen in Tokyo in this area called Golden Gai, which are these amazing like alleyways that have been there since World War II, where there's hundreds of these tiny bars that only fit like 7 people each. They're these really tiny spaces. So as a result, they use space really efficiently. So you'll have, bottles next to CDs, next to books. So the sort of crowded nature of everything behind the bar there, that's definitely inspired by Japan. This next page, we see the kid, who's the third of our 4 members here. I wanted to get across kind of the innocence of this character where, he sees this hurt bird and he's really interested in it. And he's sort of clueless to everything else. We see already that he and the artisan have had some interactions where the kid doesn't know much, but he kind of knows already not to trust the artisan. I wanted to get across that they've sort of known each other for a little bit now, but they're in some kind of hellish situation that we're going to explore a little more here. This next page, we introduced like the last of our 4 kind of in shadow, which is the Wraith, who is a really important character. The lettering here, I told Tom Long that I wanted something sort of biblical, like a kind of crusade font. I wanted this character to be really different from the other 3. He speaks in a much less human way. He really is sort of a different type of character from the others. And another kind of use of the environment, you can see this is a giant kind of spine, and the spine of whatever this thing was is now dead, of course, and it's become a cave that they're sort of hiding out in. I really like the idea of suggesting like a history to these environments, that they were one thing and now they've been repurposed. And we can kind of see from the interaction here that the other 3 are sort of trying to motivate the Wraith, where they've been bound together by this punishment, and the Wraith is sort of the one that's kind of moping in his, in his current situation, and the other 3 really want to kind of get moving. The artisan explains on the next page what the kill luck actually is, which is that they're all linked together by this sort of invisible signal where if one of them dies, they all die. It doesn't matter if they're on the same planet or 10 planets away. That's sort of the hell of their situation. And then we go on the next page and we understand the importance of why the artisan was wearing a cloak in the beginning, where you see that they're getting looks from these other robots outside. And the laborer kind of quietly knows, because he's used to kind of these planets that the artisan doesn't go to, where he's like, listen, like your class stands out here. You really need to wear a cloak. But the artisan is like sort of so vain that he's kind of, he thinks it's beneath him. There is this moment here that like I find funny of him throwing a snowball. The reality of why a snowball would affect a robot that's made of metal and why he would need to block it is kind of funny. Like it really wouldn't damage him, but I thought that felt like a human reaction to kind of block something being thrown at you. The next page with Wraith here kind of explains why they are sentenced. Like, why is it 4 of them that are linked together? And the Wraith kind of explains, because the nature of what he is, he's kind of this crusader used to these hellish missions that, if it was 1 or 2 of us, we could commit to one path of survival and live. But 4 people over the course of a lifetime eventually will drift apart, or something will happen to one of them. And that is sort of the hell that they're living in now. Now, we have the arrival of these scavengers here, which are these robots who have fallen on hard times and they're looking for parts. They've noticed the unfinished kid. Now, the nature of an unfinished is that the parts are so new that they can be basically taken off the kid and used to repair injuries. So even though the unfinished is sort of a lesser class, it can also have valuable components. And they notice the artisan too, where the artisan is also a very valuable robot, where just seeing an artisan on a planet like this is unusual. So that's why the nature of them wearing cloaks was to kind of blend in away from this situation. This next shot, this big glory shot of the Wraith kind of standing up, I really wanted to hold the Wraith's reveal until this moment. So a lot of the marketing for the series, the Wraith wasn't seen at all. This is really the first time a lot of people would see this character. I wanted to get across that, we met the artisan, then we met the laborer who's a little bit bigger, and then we get to the Wraith, who's just this monstrous robot. And I wanted to get even across the idea that he's a robot, but only in sort of the strict sense of his internal wiring. Like his outside is almost more kind of crustacean armor. I wanted it to be that, he doesn't use blasters. He doesn't use traditional weapons. He is sort of this more ancient looking form of machinery, that he's really not in any way like these other robots. They look sort of more traditional robotic, and he's something else entirely. And this next shot here, next page, interesting little character moment I want to throw in. One of the scavengers bows here because the notion that he's seen a Wraith and he knows what that is, that he's encountered a Wraith before. He knows it's not something to mess with. So he bows out of a sign of respect here. And this is also the scavenger that the Wraith leaves alive at the end of this issue, which is also intentional. This scavenger here too, when you see his profile, initially he had a human nose that I kind of took off. Like it was, I felt like I was pushing more and more away from humanoid sort of faces, and I kind of taking away their humanity more and more and pushing the designs. So I went back and sort of like erased that. This 2-page spread here is the first time we really see the Wraith kind of cutting loose. And I want to get across the idea that the Wraith is not just much stronger than you might expect, but much faster, where what might have been a fight is not even a fight. Like one punch and the first scavenger's dead, another punch and the second one is dead. I like the notion that he punches the second scavenger's head into his own knee. I thought that was kind of an interesting way to take someone out, like the kind of the awkwardness of that kind of hit or the preciseness of it. Then the third scavenger that loses just an arm, that's the one that bowed earlier. So the idea that the Wraith is both punishing him, but also showing him mercy because he showed kind of the appropriate level of, like humility and respect. The next page here, we see the Wraith turn to kind of see that the kid is scared. And this is your first real sense that the Wraith has a bit of a heart. And that with the laborer talking to him here, the Wraith will agree to kind of seek the cure that they're seeking because of the kid. And the Wraith values innocence. So even though he's sort of this brutal warrior, he really still sees a purpose for himself here. And we see the artisan dealing with the lone surviving scavenger. This is also showing that the artisan doesn't just disable, that he can actually fix things. Like his skill, whenever he uses it, can be a benevolent one. But of course, it's like a self-serving gesture here where they're trying to find a ship. This little interaction on the next page, I like the notion that the laborer seemingly is looking out for the kid, but when the artisan sort of calls him out on that, he's like, that was smart work, using the kid to motivate the Wraith, targeting his sympathy, but it was smart work that I noticed. I like the notion that the artisan kind of sees through the laborer, and the laborer might not be as sort of altruistic as he seems. There might be more of a self-serving nature to him, even looking after the kid. This little talk here between the Wraith and the kid also is supposed to kind of open up the Wraith to us a little bit, to kind of hint at, he's the only one in this issue that gets these sort of flashback shots. So when the kid asks if he was a soldier, I wanted this like one quick shot of a memory the Wraith has where he's, covered in blood after a fight and he's watching this fleet burning coming out of the sky, as if it was a quiet moment he remembers from a former life where, it's a beautiful little memory of him watching like this fleet break down. And then the kid asks, well, if we all did crimes, like what did you do? And we get another quick shot of a couple terrified, unfinished on some other planet. Initially, these flashbacks were in full color, but I realized it was a little confusing. So by making them sort of monochrome, I thought that really cemented it more as a traditional flashback. We also see here that the artist, or the Wraith rather, kind of like the artisan, as much as damage they can do, they also have a benevolent ability where the Wraith knows how to deal out injuries, but he also knows how to heal injuries. So in this case, he heals the bird that the kid was interested in and lets it go. Like I really wanted the Wraith to sort of embody something like an Optimus Prime character, a Captain America character, a real heart, but also in the body of this kind of warrior. Our final page here is our group taking off for Arrakis, which is this party planet they're about to head off to. This first kind of group shot here of we finally see them all sort of assembled. Like I want to get across like their personalities, and the kid kind of like peering over the console as they go on their quests, and the artisan making this last little joke as they head to the party planet. And that is the end of issue 1. I want to talk a little bit about the pinups here. The first one here is by Kei Zama, who's an amazing Transformers artist from Japan. I've known Kei for a few years now. I really love this piece of showing the kid's perspective of what just went down. I love the kind of like the cloak falling over the kid's head. I think it's a really nice touch. The next one is by Andrew Griffith, who's another Transformers artist I've known for a long time. I like this too. It's an interesting choice to focus on the scavengers because they're characters who get killed in this issue really quickly. But it was interesting to do a pinup based on them. And the snow effects are really cool here too. The next pinup is by Albert Nguyen, who's another artist, really talented guy I went to grad school with. We've been friends for a long time. I like this notion of the Wraith rising out of the snow and just his eyes having this sort of the only color on it. And the final one is by my longest friend in this issue, Jeremy Waltman, where we went to undergrad together. We've been friends since we went to Penn State University. Jeremy is an artist and a filmmaker now. This was the first pinup I ever saw of the series. This is the first time I saw anyone else draw these characters. and I really like it. I think it's like he managed to pick the character, like choose the characters, but also put his own spin on them. Like I think they really feel like a different take on them. Really like that a lot. And then here's our teaser of issue 2, which is the face of the artisan, which is probably the character that might have made the most impression in this first issue. And heading into issue 2.